Welcome to the Metal Voice. Today on the show, the one and only Mr. Vivian Campbell, Last in Line, Def Leppard, Ex Dio, and a whole bunch of other projects in his past. What's going on, Vivian?
Yes, it's quite a long resume, isn't it? I'm not sure what
we don't have all day.
What to make of that. Yeah, I know. So,
all right, Last in Line, new album coming out February 22nd on Frontiers Music. Two. It's simply called Two. So quickly, I mean, I just spoke to Jeff Pilson. I hung out with Jeff Pilson. Mm-hmm. And what was it like working with him on this album?
It's always a pleasure to work with Jeff. Jeff is, I mean, his energy, just, you know, you've spoken and you know the kind of person he is.
Oh, yeah.
He's very upbeat, funny, you know. It's always a better room when Jeff is in it. So, and then there's his musical talent, you know, which is quite diverse. I mean, people think, oh, yeah, he's a bass player. He's a lot more than a bass player. You know, he plays keyboards, he can play guitar. He's very, very musical just in general. He's a great singer. He's a very experienced and talented songwriter. He's a great engineer and producer. You know, he's just a really, really well-rounded, very talented chap. So it's always a pleasure to work with Jeff. The hardest part about working with Jeff is just nailing him down. He's so busy. Yeah. You know, and that's true of all of us, you know, with our overlapping schedules and stuff, you know, and the Two record was much like our first album, Heavy Crown, that came out in 2016. I mean, when we were recording that, I mean, it's just, we have to work around everyone's revolving busy schedules, and we kind of do these records piecemeal, you know. It's not like we go in and we've got 3 or 4 weeks to actually make a record. I mean, that would be luxurious. I'd love to do that at some point, but that's not how records are made on this level, you know. So, you know, we'd write and record 2, 3, 4 songs at a time, you know, and then there'd be months in between where we'd reconvene and do another 2, 3, 4 songs, and that's just the way it is, you know.
I heard the album, okay? I thought it was really cool. And would it be fair to say this album has like flavors of Dokken with Dio?
I don't know about Dokken, to be honest, but I mean, there's the underlying element of the Dio thing, yeah. I mean, that's because, you know, that's me and Vinny, and that was 50% of the original Dio band. And, you know, when we started the project, Jimmy was still alive. So when Jimmy and Vinny and I played, I mean, it was just, I mean, it was the Holy Diver album all over again. You know, there's just a chemistry that the three of us had when we played together. You know, losing Jimmy was a real kick in the nuts for us, and you know, but we eventually picked it up and carried on. We were very fortunate to get Phil Suzanne in, and Phil is very much cut from the same cloth as Jimmy in terms of understanding the pardon me, the dynamics of that kind of music. So but he's a different player than Jimmy. You know, Jimmy was a very fundamental player, had a huge tone, and you know, just great timing, and Jimmy just really kind of held the fort. You know, he held things down, and you know, Phil is less of a fundamental player. He's a little bit more adventurous and musical, and he wants to find passages to play in. You know, he's a bit more like, I always say, he's a bit more like Geezer Butler in Sabbath. Yeah. You know, and a bit like John Entwistle. Like he can be a busy player, but not necessarily for the sake of it. You know, but he's very adventurous, I think. And you know, so but I think about, you know, other than the underlying Dio-esque tonality to the record, I think it sounds more modern. You know, Andy is you know, has a strong aggressive punk element as well as a hard rock element, and you know, he brings that energy to the band, and so it kind of sounds a bit more modern. You know, I think all in all, the Two album is really Last in Line finding our own true sound, you know, which is one of the reasons why I named it Two. It was just, you know, it sounds like a band's second album. It sounds like there's growth there compared to the Heavy Crown album. And the other reason I named it Two was, you know, when we put out Heavy Crown in 2016, you had Last in Line, Heavy Crown, and I realized that there's a certain amount of confusion because the band is called Last in Line. You know, we're named after an album, so to have an album with a name gets even more confusing to some people. You know, if you don't really know, if you're a casual observer, if you don't really know the history of the band. So I just, you know, I kind of as the band moves on, I kind of want to reference it graphically as LIL, you know, on T-shirts and whatnot, and you know, so that people who grow with this band and you know, go along on the journey with us will maybe reference it more that way, and we can move away from the name of the second Dio album. You know, when the project started, we had no ambition, you know, other than to play songs from the first 3 Dio albums and then just play some clubs around LA where we were all living at the time. You know, had I known that we were going to be at this stage, you know, writing and recording and releasing albums of original music, I would have thought twice about naming the band Last in Line. It just seemed like a very appropriate title at the time when we, you know, were going out to do this. It was me and Jimmy and Vin together with Andrew Freeman, and you know, Ronnie had passed away about a year and a half prior to us starting this project, and you know, like I said, we just wanted to go out and play the early Dio songs and have fun. I mean, nobody thought it was going to grow and become a real serious band, but here we are, you know. So you know, I just kind of think LIL2 just really kind of streamlines that, but also, you know, the reference to the second album. I know it's not an original title to name your album 2 by any means. It's been done since, you know, the dawn of the genre back in the 70s or whatever. But you know, it really kind of streamlines it. It's our second album, and it really sounds like us finding our true sound. You know, it's the growth of the band. I mean, this is 2. It's a second incarnation, you know, with Phil Suzanne now that Jimmy's gone, you know, and we've had a lot of years to play with Phil. In the interim, we've done a bunch of shows, and the chemistry's really grown, and we've found our sound.
But what do you make of all these copycat bands that sound like Dio today?
I have no idea, to be honest. I mean, I'm not familiar with any of them. I don't listen to a lot of music. I generally live under a rock, you know, and just kind of do my own thing. But, you know, on that topic, I don't know whether or not these bands do sound like Dio. I'll take your word for it. But, you know, if Andrew had walked into that rehearsal room back in late 2011, if he had sounded anything like Ronnie, I wouldn't be out playing shows with him, you know. I mean, I just think that would be a bit cheesy. I mean, you know, Ronnie was the best of his genre, and he was just like such a gifted singer, had such a unique voice and tonality and style to what he did. And, you know, I think it would have been really creepy to go on stage with a Ronnie clone, because it's always going to be second rate. Mm-hmm. You know, when we first started doing the Last in Line project, a lot of people said to me, why didn't you get this guy or that guy? They sound like Ronnie. And that's totally missing the point. You know, yeah. Andrew is a really strong singer. I mean, he's got big balls, you know, he's got a great voice. He can sing anything, and he can sing the Ronnie stuff. That's in his wheelhouse. And, you know, but he does it in his own way. You know, the tonality of his voice is totally different, and he makes it his own. And that's what appealed to me in the first place. And that's what made this an interesting project for me. You know, that you had Jimmy being, and Vinny Appice and myself, and, you know, the engine behind Ronnie on those original records. And it sounded like the Dio band, because that's what it was. And then you had this singer who took it in a different direction and gave it his own interpretation. And now, you know, we can go out and we can mix our show with the Dio classics, and now we've got 2 albums of original music to draw from, and you know, it's an exciting time for us to be able to do that. You know, it kind of reminds me of 1983, you know, 1984 when we were out on the Holy Diver tour and the original Last in Line tour, and you know, we were shedding some of the other songs that we had started doing with Ronnie. You know, when we first played on the Holy Diver tour in 1983. There's only 9 songs on the Holy Diver record, so we had to bolster our set with you know, Rainbow songs and Black Sabbath songs, and then by the time we were 1984 and we're doing the Last in Line album, the original Dio band had 2 albums to draw from, so we'd be dropping those songs more. We'd be playing more of our own original music and less Sabbath and Rainbow, and it's kind of the same thing here with us now with Last in Line. You know, we can make it more of a balance of original music and the Dio classics. It's a nice position to be in to draw on all of that, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I interviewed Vinny Appice about a year and a half ago, and I guess with your first Last in Line album, and we talked about the Holy Diver years and how you were like the only guy back then to stand up for the band for not being paid. Do you guys look back at? Do you talk to Vinny now and say, does he like thank you for standing up, or you're like, and for the people who don't know the context of this, is like you're the only one standing up to Ronnie and his management, I guess, at the time, saying, you guys, you promised us one thing and we got something else, but nobody else would stand behind you. Was that correct at the time?
Well, I mean, maybe I was fearless, or maybe I was stupid, or maybe it was a bit of both. But I mean, I was in my early 20s, and it wasn't about the money to me, but it's about the principle. I'm very, very big on principle. I mean, when somebody makes me a promise, I expect them to keep it, because I keep my word. That's just the way I was brought up. Like when I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I do it, and I meet my commitments. And Ronnie had made us a promise, and we worked for very, very, very little money. Less than people in our road crew. And the band was very, very, very successful. The albums were going. First album went gold pretty much right away. Last in Line went platinum. As did Sacred Heart. So, back then people bought records, and we were selling a lot of records, and we were, we were all very involved in the creative process. It really, really was a collaborative process, but we were kind of squeezed, on that as well. But, we paid our dues. That's kind of how we looked at it. Ronnie was a big name, and that made sense to me in the band Dio, obviously. And, but I think, Wendy never really saw it as a band. Wendy Dio, Ronnie's estranged wife and manager, she never really saw the value, I think, in the band. And that's something that really, really upset me with Ronnie, after I was fired, was that I think Ronnie knew better. He understood the real magic that the original band had and the chemistry we had and how we created together. And so that was particularly sad that he was willing to capitulate to Wendy. I think he was really fearful of her, and he never stood up to her. And like I said, it was never about money. People say to me, "Oh, Campbell's greedy. He wanted the same money as Dio, or whatever." No, I just wanted Ronnie to fulfill his promise. It was a contract that was between the four of us, and he just wasn't man enough to follow through on it, and I called him on it, and I got fired as a result. So it was very, very painful for me, for many, many years, and I didn't react to the situation very well.
But for fans too, right? Man, but Vivian, I was a fan back then, and I was like shocked, and I was like upset that an important, integral part of the band, which was you and your guitar playing, was no longer in the band. So I was really pissed off.
I'll bet I was more pissed off.
I think maybe not.
such is life, you look back in these things and you say, well, I wish I'd done this a little differently and whatever, but I wouldn't have done anything differently in regards to that, the principle of that situation. No. I still would have gotten myself fired. I would have stood up and I would have said, hey, you promised us by the third album, you would make it an equity situation, and they offered us a few $100 more per week, and I got sent a contract, by Wendy, and it said failure to sign and return this contract by this date will constitute you no longer being in the band. I tried to call Ronnie. I was in Ireland at the time. It was a break in the tour between legs of the Sacred Heart tour. We'd finished North America. We were going to start in the UK, and I'd gone back to visit my family, my parents, and I got this contract. FedEx envelope, and I was shocked. I opened it and I tried to call Ronnie, and he wouldn't answer the phone. And the next thing, the band shows up in the UK with Craig Goley. I remember watching them on TV. They get a live TV show, and I'm thinking, oh my God. So that was it. I mean, it was a seamless transition. Obviously, it was well executed and planned. But I wouldn't change any of that. I would change maybe how I reacted to it in later years. Ronnie and I both made the mistake of airing our grievances in public, which is never a good idea. But, it is what it is. And it was only after Ronnie passed away that I was really able to kind of look at the entire situation in a very different light, and for years I didn't want anything to do with the legacy of Dio. And after Ronnie passed away, I'm finally able to look at it. And maybe, around that time, a year or two after Ronnie passed away, I had my own cancer diagnosis, and that kind of changes your outlook on a lot of things too. So, and also around that time, I'd just done a stunt tour, or a tour as a stunt guitarist with Thin Lizzy, and that really kind of reignited, my youthful passion as a guitar player. Lizzy meant so much to me growing up, my teenage years and really my formative years prior to Dio, and so all these things kind of happened and coalesced, and I really wanted to play guitar again like that, to reconnect with that fire that I had as a teenager. And, I was able to look back on the Dio catalog, and my thinking about it just changed dramatically. And I thought, what, I created those songs together with Ronnie and together with Jimmy and Vinny. We wrote those songs, we made those records, we toured, we sold those records, we created that magic, and so it's as much our legacy, Jimmy and Vinny and myself, as it was Ronnie's, but it was I walked away from that, and I disowned it for many, many years because of the hurt that it caused me, and like I say, after Ronnie had passed away, I was able to just look at it in a different way and enjoy it. And I thoroughly enjoy it. I can't express you how much joy it brings to me to be up there on stage playing with Vinny now. I mean, it was great when Jimmy was alive too. Just it was the original magic, and but just to to play this music and our new music, with Andrew and Phil and myself and Vinny, it's a great band, and it really is cathartic to me. I mean, it really makes me feel alive, and to get back to that,
Vivian, did you get, after you were sort of fired from the band, were they still giving you the royalty checks over the years, or they cut you off?
Jimmy, we never got royalty checks. that was the whole thing. We worked for minimum wage essentially. Today? Even though we were writing the music, we got none of the albums, we got no royalties, we got none of the merchandise or the T-shirts or the ticket sales for the venues or anything. I mean, we got a flat salary that was less than the road crew, but we were willing to do that because we had been promised by the third album it would be an equity situation. So that was the principle that got me fired. So yeah.
All right. How about writing a memoir today, sort of like putting it all in a book?
Yeah, well, you're not the first person to mention that. That's one of those things I keep thinking about. Well, my career has been very storied, shall we say. I've played with a lot of great bands and a lot of great musicians, and there's a lot I could write a book about, and I do enjoy writing. Actually, I think I find it easier to express myself in the written word as opposed to the spoken word, but. It's one of those things where I keep putting it off. Yeah, someday. And on a practical level, I can't type. So I'd really have to learn how to do that first. Otherwise, I'd be, one finger pecking it out on a laptop for years. The gatekeepers would have let that happen. I think Ronnie and I absolutely would have worked together again. Yeah. Ronnie, people are complicated. People always ask me, well, what's Ronnie Dio like? You can't sum it up. I mean,